another Library Bobbins episode. This is our last one. It's a drawstring backpack. Stay tuned. Okay, we're going to start. We're working on our drawstring backpack. You'll each have a kit, and in your kit you'll have the instructions for how to make your drawstring backpack. And I gave you one that I printed off the internet because it is such a clear, it's the best one I found. And it's the one we're going to be utilizing today and following. I have a few comments to make about it. I've attached an option for doing a pocket if you want to add one. I didn't include any fabric, but if you had some left over from previous things, or someone in the family has a piece of fabric, I showed you how to make a pocket, and I used an elastic loop and a button for the one I had elsewhere. We also have a little note to you about how to trim close to your corners to make it easier for you to turn things inside out. And you will also have in your kit, you're going to have some dark gray or sort of blackish fabric. Mine's a light gray. I just use stuff from my home. You're going to have 3 of these strips. You're going to have a couple casing strips that is kind of already there for you. You're going to have 2 of those. Then we have 2 little squares that we're going to be working with. And then we have you're going to have 2 main fabrics. Mine is a yellow butterfly here, or dragonfly. And then you're going to have 2 lining fabrics, which mine is a solid yellow. And I picked a light color so that you can see what I'm doing, because I'm going to sew in a teal. So if you get everything out, you're going to need a little iron and of some sort. You can finger press the smaller things, but you would have to have a regular iron to help you with some of the things. Now, it mentions in the instructions a little gizmo that you can use to make bias, and I have one, but I don't use it because it's such an awkward thing for me to use. It's easier for me to just to press. So, what we're going to do here is we're going to go to the sewing on your page 2 of your instructions, and we have some prep work to do. Okay, so what they ask you to do is take your casings, and I've already pre-done some of this on an example here. What you're going to do is you're going to measure over 1/4 of an inch. Okay, now I put pins in there to hold it down so that when I iron it, and I have the pins going out so that my iron doesn't hit the tops of my pins, because some of these can melt. And I previously marked 1/4 of an inch. You're not going to see the line, but on the inside of this, I drew a pencil mark, just a light pencil mark. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's a pencil mark right where my fold is, so it makes it hard to see. And I just took my ruler and I measured 1/4 of an inch, and then I folded over and pinned, and then I'll take it to my iron and I'll press it. I have an iron off cam. And then it doesn't tell you to fold it over again, but I'm going to tell you to fold it over again. Okay, once you've pressed it, remove your pins, and then I would fold this over one more time. That way it encloses the raw edges, because you're going to put so much effort into this, you don't want to see it fray. So I would take and fold that over again, and repin it. And you can press it again if you want, but I can go right to the sewing machine and sew that. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to sew right close to my edge there that's open. And let me get my needle down in here. Okay, make sure it's going to fall where I want it to go. Now when you're sewing these edges of your casings, you don't have to go back and forth to secure the edges, the ends, because when you're stitching, these are going to be in the seam when you finally do the seam and put it in the backpack, so you don't have to secure the edges. Just remember to remove your straight pins as you sew. You do not want to run over any straight pins. Now I really enjoyed doing this project. Okay, I'm raising my needle, pulling out my thread, and cutting it off. And to save some time, I've already gone ahead and did my other end. So you're going to have something that looks similar to this, okay? On both of your ends of the one piece and on your other piece, okay? Then, once you get your casing hemmed, you need to fold it in half. We're going to skip ahead a little bit. Make sure that your raw edges or your seamed edges are to the inside. We're going to fold the wrong sides together. This is folding it like a hot dog, okay? And then we're going to press that. And then that way it'll be already ready for later on when we need it. So, now it's all folded, it's ready for later on, and I'm going to set that aside, okay? We'll set it over there. Okay, the other thing they ask you to do is take your 3-inch squares, and I've already folded it in half once, okay? And I'm going to press it. So it's pressed in half, and then you open it up, and you're going to take and you're going to fold the one edge in to meet the center line, okay? And then you're going to take it back to the iron, and you're going to press that. Now I'm pressing off camera, but so then you've done the pressing, it's to the fold. Okay, and you want to do the same thing to the other side. You're taking and you're folding it to the center, and then you're pressing. So then it looks like this. And then you need, after you get it folded and pressed, we're going to run a line of stitching down one side and then the other. And please do the first side of stitching on the one that's open, where we have the folds, okay? That way it won't shift on you when you go to do the other. So go ahead. Again, you do not have to backstitch to secure. Raise my needle. Okay. I'm just swapping it around here, and I'm going to do the other side. And all I did was follow the inner side of part of my foot. Okay, raise my needle, cut my threads. So then you should have it looking like this, okay? and that'll anchor and seal, keep those together, okay? Because this is going to be folded later, and we're going to use it for our loops on our bags, okay? Alrighty, so make sure you've done what prep work you need, sew up your pieces, and we are ready to move on to page 3. Now, if you were with me when we were doing the pillowcases, you know we took 2 pieces of fabric and then we stuck a trim piece in between, okay? We're going to do a similar process. You're going to take your piece that you folded, okay, and the open edge, the raw edge, okay? What I wanted you to do is take and fold this in half after you've, okay? And I like to just finger press a center line, okay? We're just finger pressing a center line. Then you take your main fabric, and if you fold it in half so the right side is out, and finger press, and lay that on your table, you'll see where your finger pressing mark is. You'll see where the fold is on your strip, your casing, and you can lay that right on top of that crease. It will lay right on it, okay? And then that will guarantee that it's centered. Now take your lining fabric, okay? Take your lining fabric. This is the 15-inch side, the shorter end, not the long end. The 17 should be your length. Your width is 15, so that's what we're using, okay? Okay, I just finger pressed that, so I have my crease at the top, and now I'm going to lay that on top of the other 2 creases. And that should center all those pieces together. I'll double check that to make sure they're all lined up. And I'm going to put a pin in there. I got them all lined up. They're sandwiched together, just like what we did when we did our burrito pillowcases. Okay, so you have your main fabric with the pretty side up, laying on the table. Then you have the raw edges or open area facing out, and you're laying that down, and you'll have about 1.5 inches left over, okay? Then you're going to lay your lining fabric down, and so the wrong side is up, and the pretty side is facing the pretty side of your main fabric, okay? So the right sides are in, the wrong sides are facing out. Okay, so then from that pin, you want a center pin, everything should be centered, and you can go ahead and either clip it or you can pin it, okay? I personally like pinning. I've always been a pinner. I do like the clips when you have a bulky material, like right here where this edge is where we sewed. That's going to be a little bit bulky, and sometimes our needles will bend. So then you just pin across, lining up everything, making sure it stays flat. With right sides together, you've now pinned the one edge. We are going to start at the one side and work our way across. Now the seam is going to be 1/2 inch this time. Now if you don't know where 1/2 inch is on your machine, measure from the center of your needle out. So I'll look at my needle and I'll see where the inch is, okay? And I can either put a piece of tape there or just keep my eye on that one line. Sometimes you have lines on your plate, and you can follow a line. Okay, that looks like about the second mark in. Okay, and I'm going to do a 1/2 inch. Now, with this seam, we are going to backstitch at the beginning and the end, because this is a major seam with your backpack. We want to make sure that it is secure. So, go ahead, and after you've pinned everything, make sure your needle's going to come down without catching on anything. And we're going to go forward a couple stitches, and then we're going to go backwards a couple stitches. And we are working on a 1/2 inch seam. So we're going to go across. I'm going to back stitch and then come off. Okay, raise my needle, raise my foot, come out, and cut my threads. Okay, and I did this in the teal so that you can see what I'm doing here. Okay, so I've sewed across, and I've also anchored the back stitch at the beginning and the end of my stitching, and that is a 1/2 inch. Okay, now what she says is to press towards your lining, which if you turn it on the right side and you just give it a little bit of a press, that kind of sets the seam. Okay, I'm going to move this over for a minute here. Okay, so I have my main fabric up, wrong side up, and I'm just pressing it to set, okay? And then they're going to have you press this out. So you're going to grab a hold of your casing, and you're going to line up your seams there, and you're going to press that nice and flat. Okay? We don't want any weird kinks in it, and then you just press it. Okay? Now I don't have any steam in my iron, so, but if you do, it'll make it do it a little bit better. Okay. And then I'm going to flip it over just to make sure that I got a good seam there. And then you'd go ahead and do that again to your other piece. And I've already got one piece here sewed, so I'll just press it here. Okay, so you'll have both of your pieces pressed, and then they want you to separate them. And here's where you're going to take your little pieces that you sewed for your loops, and on the main fabric, the bottom of your main fabric, not up where the casing is, you're going to open it up, okay, and you're going to measure with your ruler 2.5 inches from the bottom, okay. And when I did that, I took a pencil, because it's not going to be seen in the seam, and I just put a line right where that should be, okay? I'll show you on this one. I made a marking 2.5 inches up from the bottom. This is the bottom, and I made my marking. Now I'm going to put my tab right above that line. So I'm going to take my tab, okay, I'm going to fold it in half, make sure your prettier side is out if you have knots on it, and I'm going to pin that. So my raw edges, which is this edge here where it's open, it's going to be along the same raw edge on the side of my main fabric. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to put 2 pins in, because if you only put 1 pin, your piece might shift, because if there's only 1 pin, it's like a pendulum, it'll move. If you put 2 in, it will anchor that. So this is what I did. My line is right here, okay, this is the bottom. My line's right there, and I pinned my tab right there. Now, just to secure this so it doesn't go anywhere, we're going to take and to the machine, and we're just going to base stitch that. Okay. And I'm just going to go, I'm not going to go a full 1/2 inch. Here you can go a 1/4 of an inch or an 1/8 of an inch. You're just tacking that tab to the front of your bag. So I'm just going to, and make sure you watch, if you have your pins out far enough, you won't run over them, and you can hold them, leave them in there. And I'm just going to go over it once, then I'm going to back stitch over it, and then I'm going to go ahead and across. Raise my needle, raise my foot, cut my threads. Okay. Trim any other threads I don't want. Okay, take my pins out. And when you're done, you're only doing this to one main fabric. You're not doing it to both. So when you're done, you'll have 2 tabs on your bottoms. Okay? Alrighty. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. Now, I have the right sides up, right here on my one piece. Okay? It's up. The tabs are facing me, the loops. My casing is here. Okay. Now, when you have it flat here, your piece that goes back, that should have went towards your lining. When we ironed it, it should have went towards the lining. Okay. If it didn't, you got to make sure that it does. Okay. So it looks like this. Okay. This is the main fabric. This is what we sewed, which is in our seam allowance, and you want it towards your lining. Okay. Whatever piece you have for your lining, it should go towards that. Okay. And kind of straighten that out. Then you're going to take, so I have my piece all laid out flat. I'm going to do the same with my other piece. I'm going to match up my main fabrics. They're going to be facing each other. And I'm going to make sure that my seam is also again facing my lining. So I'm going to put right sides together. I'm going to line up my seams. So here's my bottom piece right here. Notice that my seam is going towards my lining. Then my upper piece, okay, there's my pretty side, and there's the seam also, and it's the extra fabric's going back towards the lining, and I'm going to line that up. I want those seams to match, okay? And then I'm going to put a pin in there. And your pin should probably ride right along those seams. Okay? So my pin comes right along that where I sewed. Okay. I'm going to pin both pieces together, but along the side where the lining is, I'm going to leave about 1/4 of an inch, or not 1/4 of an inch, a 4-inch gap. Okay? And that's so that I can turn this inside out. Okay? This part is similar to the purses we did. Okay, we did those little bags. So we left an opening so that we could turn them. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to take the time here, pin this all the way around. Make sure that you line up where your seams are going. Okay. And we are to sew, there we go, around using a 1/2 inch seam. Okay? You don't want to use 1/4 of an inch. You want to use a 1/2 inch. Okay? Because we have to include that 1/2 inch will catch our tabs, our little loops. Okay? So go ahead and pin your pieces together. Mark your 4 inches. You can use a ruler. You're going to do it on your lining page. And I will use probably my ruler, mark it off with a little pencil because it's not going to be seen. We're about 4 inches. And then I'm going to sew it all out. Then I'm going to trim my corners. I showed you in your paper. Let's see here. So we're on page 4, making sure the seams are towards the lining, and we're doing a 1/2 inch. It doesn't say a 1/2 inch, but please mark on your paper a 1/2 inch, okay? And then they want us to leave about a 4 inch opening, which I've told you, and back stitch at the beginning where you start and where you end, because when we start pulling it through, we don't want to tear our seam. We don't want it to come out. And then, let's see. So we can go ahead and do that right now. And I'm going to let you pin yours, sew it, and then we'll come back. Just want to mention that when you're going around your bag and you want to keep your 1/2 inch markings, and you want to come to the corner and then pivot, what I do is I take a ruler and I measure what my 1/2 inch seam would be, and I put an X there. And then when I come to that corner with my needle down in the center of that X, then I can pivot and continue around. So that'll give me a 1/2 inch the whole way around. And so you can do that while you're sewing, okay? Okay, I'm back to get ready to turn this. I've sewed it all the way around. I left my 4 inches, but I want to go back over. Now, what I also did when I was going around is I double stitched over my where my loop is, okay? I back stitched and then came back across it to double enforce that or reinforce it. You can also come in another 1/2 inch and run a stitch through there, which I think I'm going to do. I'm just going to go over it and then back stitch over it and come back again. The reason I'm saying that, needle up, is because that is going to have a lot of pull with you on the bag. So I just went over it a second time there just to reinforce that. Let's see, where's my other pen? Because when I have people tugging on that, or I'm carrying stuff, I want to make sure that that doesn't come out. So, needle up. So this is in addition to what the lady who wrote the instructions called for. I just like to have something reinforced that's going to have a lot of tugging on it. Okay, so I did that. So it's got some stitching there. It's reinforcing it. Okay, now I'm going to go to the corner here. This is how we trim corners so they go come out easier or prettier on the other side. You see where my stitching is. It goes to a point there. And you also see my markings where I drew for my 1/2 inch. I am going to go across, but I'm not going to go on right at that line. See my green thread? I'm a little ways away from it. okay? I don't want to go on it. And then I'm going to come back about an inch, and I'm going to angle my cut. I'm going to still stay above my sewing, but I'm going to angle my cut. Again, an inch away, I'm angling my cut. So it looks like that. And that's what I gave you a diagram of. And that, when you turn this out, will help you with the corners. So I'm going to do that with all my corners. Cut some loose threads while I'm at it. And then I'm going to turn it inside out, or right side out. So do that to all 4 of your corners. Do not cut into your thread where you've sewed. Be careful that you don't do that. Now, if you did accidentally do that, all you have to do is re-sew that corner. And when you re-sew the corner, go about an inch or 2 away from it, and make sure you back stitch as you begin and end. Okay? Okay, so all my corners are stitched, or cut, trimmed. I am going to reach in here. I actually love doing this bag. And I'm going to start pushing my bag through. Okay, tug on my little tabs to get them out. Reach my hand in there, find my opening, and reach my hand in there and push out my corners. Now, if you can't do it by your finger, now see how nice that corner came out when I trimmed it? That's a nice corner. So push out all your corners. You can even push out the corners in your lining. We're going to be pushing them in anyhow again. Okay, now we're going to go back to where our opening is. And we're going to make sure that we work that so it's just like the seam. Okay, so right there I've worked it close, okay? And just like purses, we're going to press this, make it easier so it stays put. Okay, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to start a little bit past where I sewed. I'm going to go right along here 1/8 of an inch, and then I'm going to back stitch at the beginning and at the end, and I'm going to sew that close. Okay? I'm going to go forward, I'm going to go backwards, and then I'm going to go forward again. And I'm just doing about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge, going past where and then stitch past where the seam was, back stitch, and come right off. Okay, raise my needle, raise my foot, cut my threads, and it looks good. Okay, so you can test your seam, make sure that it's sealed by just gently pulling on it. And I've cut both edges, and I have a very narrow seam, and now I can stuff my lining into the main part of the bag. So just go ahead and stuff it in there. Push out your corners again. Okay, and it should look something like this. Okay, and you have a little bit of extra space on the edges, and the seams are hidden, so there's no raw edges exposed, just like what we did with our pillowcase and the purses. So you've just relearned some of the things that you did prior. And just like any other skill, once you learn it, you can use it over and over again. Now, what we're going to do, we can go to the iron and press this again, but since it's been pressed a couple times, what you're going to do is, if you have a removable tray on your sewing machine, you can remove that. And what the person who made these instructions has you do is put a little top stitch all the way around, and you're going to do it on your main fabric a little bit below your casings, okay? And that'll reinforce and hold your bag steady there. But just come down about 1/4 of an inch, and you can loosen your thread a little bit so it's bigger, because you're just top stitching, okay? And I would back stitch at the beginning and the end, and I would start on a corner. See where my two pieces come together? That's where I'm going to start. That way it's not noticeable. Now you may have a little bit of bulk there, so you may have to start off slow. And let me see. That'll make it a little wider, I'm hoping. Let's see. Might. Okay. And I'm going to back stitch. And then I'm just going to continue along. I'm just riding my foot along that's the bigger stitch. A bigger stitch or a smaller stitch? Looks like a smaller stitch. Okay, we'll do the that's much better. And I just kind of hold it tense, trying to keep it a little flat as I go through here. And when I get to that corner, I kind of work it out there, get it as flat as I can. I might take it a little bit easier through there. Just going to go all the way around, and this is top stitching, so you want a bigger stitch length. I'm coming to the end here, so I'm going to back stitch as soon as I get there. Okay. And then I'm going to lift my needle, raise my foot, trim my threads. These threads out of here. Okay, and I have top stitched all the way around. I came down about 1/4 from my casing seam, and I did that all the way around. Okay, next thing we need to do is our ties. Okay, you have 3 of them. Okay, and the longest ones are 42 inches, okay, which is your long one. And then you have so you have 2 that you want to leave at the full length. The only thing you want to cut off are the raw ends or edges, the selvage edges. And your selvage edges would be whatever have white on it or has some little holes running down it. You want to remove those I've already done it to my pieces. So those are the selvages. I left them on, but you can cut them off, okay? When I was cutting the fabric, I just left them on. So cut those off. You don't need the selvages on. You want to continue, you're going to make a continuous bias binding strip. That is going to be your ties for your drawstring, okay? So we're making fabric ties. Whenever you do this again, if you decide to do it, you can use ribbon. I would use a strong ribbon. You could use, you could buy some bias tape and just stitch it, and that way it will be already folded for you. You can put cording through this, but I thought this would be a nice way of learning how to do this. Okay, now 2 of your strips you're going to leave as is, other than cutting off the selvages. The 3rd one you're going to cut in half, and you're going to take and you're going to sew that half piece to your other strip, making sure that you don't have any selvages. Now I already did this one, okay? So I've sewed it, and then I've ironed the seam flat, okay? You're not making the binding like you would for a quilt. You're just sewing the 2 pieces together. That's all you need to do. And I did a 1/4 of an inch, and then I pressed it, okay? And then when we get ready to work with this, we're going to take our strips after we've sewed it, and we're going to do the same thing we did with the little yellow loops, okay? We're going to have a narrower piece when we're doing that. Now this is where she says you could use a gizmo, which helps with making binding, and I personally cannot use them. They're not my cup of tea, as they say. So what you're going to do is, once you sew your 2 strips together, you're going to take, and that'll make you 2 real long strips of about 66 inches, give or take. And you're going to start with your strip, and you're going to fold it in half, okay? And we're going to fold it in half, and we're going to press it the whole way down, and watch so you don't burn your fingers, okay? And I'm only going to do a little bit of this. Now when you get over that seam, you want to make sure you line your seams up there and give that a good press, because that's more fabric in there. Okay. Now we're going to pretend that I've done it all the way down. And you're going to come back and you're going to fold in. Okay, I've pressed it in half. Now I'm going to fold in one side. And I'm going to go ahead and iron that all the way down, okay? Then I'm going to come back up. I'll just do a little bit here so you can see. Again, watch your fingers. You may want to have an adult do this since it's such a tight. You could use your fingers to do that, but it would take forever. So then once I get to one side, I'm going to come in and I'm going to fold it to the half, again to the center, and then I'm going to press that. Okay. So then you have your 2 ends pressed, and they're going to be pressed to the center, and then you're going to fold this in half. And your edges should match. And then you're going to go ahead and press it one more time. And if you need to work it a little bit, you can. Okay, so then you'll have something that looks like this. You'll have your 2 edges right there that you folded, and you folded again and pressed, okay? Once you get done with that entire strip, doing the pressing and everything. Then you need to sew your strip. Again, you're going to sew along the side with the folds first, and then come back and do the other side. Now she has done it in the instructions only once on the one side. Now that is entirely up to you, but I like the look of two strips of sewing going down here, two lines of sewing. I think it makes the strap or tie hold better, look better, it's flatter, adds a little more strength, as some call it. So once you have that entire strap sewed, I'll give you some time to do that, and when you come back, I'll show you how to insert it. So go. After you get your two straps, now I did my second one with just one seam on it so you can see. Okay? This is what one seam on it looks like. And you can tell I like to have two. Okay, so I'll show you side by side. Okay, so there you have with two and with one. Okay, and it's totally up to you. Okay, after you have your two strips tied, it's time to put your cording through your bag. Now, you have the top casings and you have the loop, okay? And I'm going to go up on the one loop. I'm going to take it through on the bottom here. You might find an easier way. And I'm just taking my one strip, okay? And I'm going to pull it through. And I'm going to leave a short end down here, okay? And then I'm going to go to the top. Now, you can use a straight pin on the end, or you can use one of these, which is a turner. And I'm going to use one of these today, because I don't know where my big straight pin is, or my big safety pin, I mean. I don't know where it is. I have one. Okay, and I'm just looping it through there. Then I'm going to take and I'm going to run this one edge through. I'm coming up the same side as I put through the loop. I'm going to go across the top of the nearest casing. I'm going to pull my fabric through. The safety pin would have worked a little bit better. Okay. Once I get it through, okay, so I have something that looks like this. I'm coming up from the loop. I'm coming up to the side. I'm going across top in the casing. And now I'm going to go through the back casing. So I'm just making a continuous loop. I'm going through the back casing now. Okay. So my side is going to look like this. Okay, so I made a continuous loop, and now I'm going to come back down to where I had started, and I'm going to knot. So I'm just pulling it down until I get back to the bottom here, and I'm just going to wrap this around and make a knot. Just make a tight one. Okay, and there you have put on your first, and you're going to have to play with this and adjust it so those end up being a little bit more even. And there you have one side of your backpack done. Okay, take your other cord or bias that we made, And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to start from the opposite side. We're going to come up through the bottom loop along that side, and I'm going to leave something hanging out, okay? I left a little bit hanging out. I'm going to go up to the top. I'm going to use the front casing, and I'm going to go back through where my other casing is in, but I'm going the opposite direction, okay? So I'm going to put my fabric through my looper, and I'm going to go back through in the hole, same hole or casing that my other cord is through. Alrighty. And now I'm going to go through to the back. I'm going to wrap around to the back. And pull my casing through, or my lacing through. Okay. And you may have to work with straightening them and so forth. They get kind of wonky. So that's why a safety pin might work better, because your cording will stay straight. Okay, so then now you have a solid loop going between your front and back casing on this side. Okay, so then you just bring that all the way through, down to the bottom, and again, make a knot. And then just play with your cords a little bit to get them lined up, and voila, your backpack is done. These were so easy to make. I mean, you had your skills from when we did the pillowcases, you had your skills from when we did the purses or pouches or bags, whatever you want to call them. And we've done the folding and the sewing and previous things. And I know I am going to be making more of these for my great nieces and nephews. They're just so easy. And they're lined, they're well constructed, and you should be proud of yourself once you've completed one of these. And then just to close it, you just pull. So there you go. And if you decide to put a little pouch here, you can do it several different ways. You can add one. You could even add one all the way across. I didn't give you any instructions for that, but you could fold another piece of fabric and put it in here just like you would do a pillowcase, having the raw edges meet on 3 sides and your fold going across the bag, and then you'd have a pouch that went across the entire bag. So I hope you really enjoyed doing these. They're fantastic. It's the rage this year. A couple years ago it was the pillowcases. Now they want to make backpacks, and they're great for taking to the beach. They're great taking to the pool, or just on a little walk. You can put your water or whatever in here, and or your books. Yeah, if you're a reader like me, you might want to put your books in here. So I hope you enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with you all. This was a whole new ball game for me, videotaping and teaching that way. I would have loved to have been here in person with you, but COVID prevented that. So I hope you enjoy this. There's a sample hanging in the library that you can look at, and the fabrics and kits will be available August 1st. Thanks for joining me. It's been a wonderful adventure. Bye-bye.